Many of you have asked me to keep doing these retirement deep dives where I take a common person's situation and I analyze it for how prepared are they for retirement? What does retirement look like for them? And importantly, instead of using professional software, which can cost $10,000 to $20,000 a year, I'm using a free online tool so that you can follow along and you can tweak things yourself. So shout out to Midlife Crisis for sending me this question, which is somebody that has $500,000, they're 50 years old, and they want to know, can I retire at 55? And if so, what does that look like? So let's jump in and look at the math. So the free online tool is called honestmath.com. It's perfectly free. I'm not affiliated. I just like it. It's a high-level tool, which I think for the purposes of these videos, which is not financial advice, I don't know your situation, but for high level, it gives us a picture of, are we in the ballpark or are we not? So honestmath.com, and I go to the first page here, which is where I input the personal information. And in this case, for the first name, I just have the case, which is $500,000 at 50 and retire at 55. I've got the birth date in January 1974, so this person's 50 years old. They want to retire at 55. They have a life expectancy of 90. Average income, shout out to Midlife Crisis who gave me this scenario, but I don't know what his income is, and that's fine. So I put in $75,000, inflating it at 2% a year. Social Security, I'm guesstimating that Midlife Crisis is going to get $2,500 a month. He's going to take that a little early. Instead of full retirement age of 67. He's going to take it at 65, and Social Security is going to increase by 2% a year. In general, I'm assuming inflation is going to be 2% in these scenarios. Now, kudos to Midlife because he's got what he called a small pension. I'm putting that in at $1,000 a month. I don't know if I'm close, and that it's going to start at 65. So that's $1,000 a month. In Midlife, if you're watching, you can just change that. If it's going to start at 55 for you, just put those numbers in. That's why I'm using a free online tool. Okay, then we go over to the portfolio, and as I said, $500,000, and that's allocation is 60-40. You can put in whatever allocation you think is right for you. Now, Midlife did say he's going to continue to be adding to his 401k until he retires. So I've got him putting in, between him and his employer, putting in 10% a year. Again, the nice thing about a free online tool is you can put in whatever numbers make sense for you. Going over to the expenses tab, I've got him at $4,000 a month, also inflating that at 2%. And then the taxable portion of the portfolio, and in this case, I'm assuming most of the money is in a tax-deferred 401k. The good news is Midlife didn't have to pay taxes on the money when it went in. He contributed that money from his salary in pre-tax dollars. But now it's time to pay the piper. It's literally time to pay the government as you take money out. So I'm assuming 80% of the portfolio is taxable. Same thing with his retirement income. I'm assuming it's going to be 80%. If I'm wrong, just change it here. Effective tax bracket of 20%. A lot of folks will say that seems high, but if you live in a state that also charges state income tax or a city that charges city income tax, this is just an all-in-one number for everything. Now we go into settings. Settings, and these are the default settings for honestmath.com. 8% for the stock market and bonds at 4.5%. Importantly, I want to point out that I clicked fat tails, and that just means the distributions of the stock market return. Instead of being a nice smooth bell curve that goes flat at the bottom, the stock market returns tend to give more higher numbers than would be predicted by a bell curve and more lower numbers than would be predicted by a bell curve, and we call that fat tails. Okay, then we just click I believe it's the show me number is what it's called, and we see what the results are of the Monte Carlo simulation here. And you can see in the median case, for what Midlife is asking, in the median case, person runs out of money at 80 years old. Now let me back up and tell you what this chart is showing us. If you look at the upper end of the light blue area, those are the people that got lucky. So a Monte Carlo simulation takes actual historic stock market data and uses a statistical method to basically run 10,000 different hypothetical lives. And then what you're seeing here is the result of that. And the upper end of the blue, the pale blue, those are folks, that's the beginning of the folks that are in the upper 20%. So of the 10,000, these are the 2,000 best people. And then the lower end of the curve, those are the unlucky people, the lower end of the blue curve. Those are the 2,000 people that did the worst in this simulation. And then the dark blue line, that's the median line. Half the people did better, half did worse. So that's the 5,000th life out of the 10,000. Hopefully that makes sense. So you can see in this case, the median people run out of money at 80. And what is it, 68, 69 for the unlucky folks. And you can see the lucky folks, you know, never run out of money. In fact, they die with over $1 million. So the question is, as Clint Eastwood said, do you feel lucky, punk? Well, do ya? So, you know, and that's one of the things that financial advisors don't share much. I'm going to talk about it later on, but just because a financial advisor says, you know, no, the numbers don't work out, doesn't mean they couldn't work out. And I think it's important that you know that. In over 20% of the cases, people die with over $1 million. So again, it just depends. Are you willing to take that kind of risk? Few people are, but I think you should make that decision. Okay, so that scenario for most people is not going to be a match. So let's go back at expenses. Instead of paying $4,000 a month in expenses, let's cut it back to $3,500 and see what happens. And that's the only thing I changed there. We run the simulation. You can see in this case, half of the people, the median line, never runs out of money. It gets pretty close to zero. But the unlucky folks end up running out of money, what is that, about 74 years old? So most people are not going to be comfortable with something like that. So now what do? Well, you know, midlife said, hey, what if I retire at 55? Well, what happens if between 50 and 60, instead of fully retiring, what if he only makes $12,000 a year? See, and this is the secret, is doing these different scenarios and just trying to evaluate. So all I'm doing here is saying, you know, what if midlife, instead of retiring, says, you know what, I don't need to make $75,000 a year now. I only need to make $1,000 a month. And maybe I have a hobby business that I could do, or I could pick up what the kids call a side hustle and make $1,000 a month. So you can see under annual income, I've got him making $12,000 a year. You can see Social Security stays the same. None of that changes. He still has his pension coming of $1,000 a month at 65. And in this case, you can see, you know what? He doesn't run out of money, and that's a good thing, right? But this is $3,500 a month. That's not, you know, what is $3,500 a month? $42,000 a year? That's living on a pretty tight budget. I'm not saying you can't do it, and definitely it's easier to do in certain countries overseas than it is here in the U.S. So if that's important to you, don't just say, well, I can't do that, but you know, maybe a lower cost city in the United States or maybe a lower cost city overseas. Question is, ¿habla español? ¿Es bueno or no es bueno? So, do you want to learn a foreign language? Because that is part of it. So, in this case, the person doesn't run out of money, and I was talking about the budget being tight. So, what if instead of $3,500 a month, which is, what did I say, $42,000 a year? Is that right? Yeah, $42,000 a year. What if we bump that up to $4,000 a month, which would be $48,000 a year? That's a lot more comfortable. Those incremental dollars between 42 and 48 or 48 and 55, that's a big deal. So let's see what happens when we run this. Okay, so we hit simulate, and you can see here, the unlucky people run out of money when they're 89. The median people die with $1.5 million, and the lucky people die with, you know, over $4.5 million. Now, that's a chart that a lot of people that I work with would say, yes, I'm willing to do that. So again, the secret sauce here is doing different scenarios and seeing, the answers aren't yes or no, but it's like, let's work with it and come up with a game plan that works for you and is exciting for you. It doesn't have to be black and white. No, you can't retire and you have to work to 65, right? It's what's the scenario that can work. So you want to work with a financial advisor to do this, but let's go back. I want to keep playing with this data with you. So same situation here. In this case, I lowered the pension to 0. Now, why did I do that? I want to show you what the value of having a pension is. So in this case, we've got the person retiring at 60, but with no pension. So what would happen there? So same scenario as before, the $4,000 a month. And you can see they run out of money. The unlucky people run out of money at 82. The lucky people, the median I should say, die with $1 million. So that might be a match for some folks. Probably not a match for most folks. Most of the people I work with would say, no, I'm not comfortable being unlucky. Although what I would say is, you don't fly this airplane into the ground. You're 2 hours away from landing and you find out you're a little bit off course. And so you make a little course correction. And so you modify some things along the way. Okay, let's keep going. So I'm going back to the personal information, and let's see, last time, what did we have? Retiring at 60. So this time, let's try 62 and see what happens. Instead of retiring at 60, 62. And same thing, this person is making $12,000 a year until 62. Again, no pension. I want to point out that's what this is. People often ask me, what's the value of a pension, right? And so here you're seeing what the value of a pension is, right? In one case, they made $1,000 a month on the side. And in this case, they're still doing it, but we've gotten rid of the pension. And instead of 60, let's see what happens at 62. We hit simulate, and you can see here that this is a situation that a lot of people would be comfortable with. So what's the value of a pension? It's those extra years that, in this case, midlife, gets to retire early and to take the pressure off and to just make $12,000 a year instead of $75,000 a year. And the important takeaway from all of this is it's not black and white. It's not yes and no. It's let's work with the data and see what's reasonable. Now, I want to caution you because you can overdo it with the data manipulation and you can force feed into something that looks like it might work, but if you're honing in too much, a lot of times you're creating a scenario that in the real world might not play out favorably for you. So again, high level, that's what I like this tool for. You do not want to make the decision whether you retire or not based on a free online tool. I think it gets you in the ballpark, and hopefully my YouTube video showed you, this is how a financial advisor could work with you. I am mea culpa biased, but I do think working with a fee-only financial advisor, somebody that's a fiduciary to you, that's not trying to sell you anything, they're just trying to help you make a good decision. I think that makes a lot of sense for everybody. So I think it makes sense to work with a financial advisor, but personally for me, I want somebody that has a fiduciary duty to me 100% of the time, and I don't have to question, are they trying to sell me anything? So if getting ready for retirement is something that's exciting, I want you to consider watching this next video, because it's not just about retiring and getting the finish line, or what I like to call the starting line. It's not about getting to the starting line of retirement, but it's also about enjoying the journey up there. So that's what this video here is about. 7 things that I want you to stop doing in your 50s in order to enjoy the journey more. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you in there. Bye-bye.